I have a question for you. You're a beginning gardener, or you're an experienced gardener, or you're more likely somewhere in between. What are you going to do at the end of this gardening season? Have you thought about it? Are you going to walk away because it was too hard, and this has been a pretty hard year for many of us? Are you going to keep going? Are you thinking about years in the future because you found something to become passionate about? What are you going to do? Well, I have some suggestions. I'm GardenerScott, a master gardener who discusses everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. And today I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts and some of my philosophies about gardening, because I think gardening is amazing. And if you are a gardener, well, then you're amazing too, because there's just so much around us to be amazed by. By sharing my experiences and some of what I've had happen to me in the garden even today, I hope to motivate you to continue gardening, especially if you're brand new, so that you can develop the experiences, the memories, and the knowledge of gardening. This is my 200th video, and when I cross these milestones, I like to get philosophical. I like to share some of my thoughts for those of you that are loyal viewers and some of you that have just discovered the GardenerScott channel. At my 100th video, I discussed the concept of gardening being a global language. Regardless of what dialect we might speak, all of us who call ourselves gardeners speak plants. We speak seeds. We speak harvests. And while the names for the specific pieces of gardening might vary depending on where you live in the world, the heart of gardening is the same. We all have basically the same beliefs about putting a seed in the ground, getting it to grow, babying it, and then enjoying the harvest afterwards. That's what being a gardener is all about. So this year, as you look to tomorrow and next month and next year, what are your thoughts about gardening? As my shirt proclaims, I enjoy gardening. I enjoy it when it's easy, of course, but I enjoy it when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I enjoy getting outside. I enjoy getting to know my plants. I enjoy just about everything there is about gardening. And that's why I try to encourage so many others to get into gardening. And once they get into gardening, I encourage them to become better gardeners. I enjoy sharing my garden with everybody that I possibly can. Yesterday, I had my granddaughters in the garden, and I was able to show them ladybug babies. That's the larvae of ladybugs that don't look like an adult at all. They were here. I showed them a marvel of nature, and they were enthralled. The youngest had to get that ladybug baby to crawl on her hand. I love that kind of stuff. Today, when I came out into the garden, I saw the very first praying mantis that I've seen in this new space. And I watched it for probably 10 minutes, including a lot of time filming. But I just watched it as it slowly walked from leaf to leaf. And I was in wonderment of the whole thing. It's so incredible. Now, this whole space has only been here this year. So for me, even though I've been gardening for 3 decades, it's almost like I'm a brand new gardener, because all of these beds have plants in them for the very first time. I just saw a new species of bee on these turnip flowers. It was black and white. I haven't seen it before, but it lives in this garden. I'm continually amazed by what I see in my garden and what I can accomplish. But as much as I've enjoyed this first year garden, it began pretty dire. I had a devastating hailstorm that knocked most of these tomatoes, all the peppers, many of my plants all the way back to the ground. It stripped their leaves, It killed a lot of what I was growing. That's how I began the season. A lot of the plants are bouncing back. I'm going to get some tomatoes on these plants, but they're a full month behind where they should be. The peppers are returning, but I may not get any fruit at all before the frost and freeze comes in about 4 to 6 weeks. But I'm okay with that because all of this creates memories for this year in the garden. This has been a very memorable year for many of us all around the world. We've had to struggle in our normal everyday lives. And many of you have discovered gardening for the first time as an escape. Well, that's why I'm asking the question, what are you going to do at the end of this season? Especially if you're new to gardening. And even more importantly, if you've been gardening for a while. What are you going to do next year? Are you still going to garden? Because this has been a hard year with hail, with hurricanes, with devastating storms sweeping through the United States Midwest. This isn't necessarily normal, but this is part of gardening. You never know what the year is going to bring. And so you've been exposed to it. You had a year in the garden. Now what? Are you going to quit because it was too hard? Or are you going to move forward and do it again because you can look back and you can think about the insects and the harvest and sharing your garden with kids? And hopefully that'll be the kind of motivation that you need to push to next year and actually become a gardener who enjoys gardening. It's up to you, of course, but I think you should push forward. I don't think you should quit if that's anywhere in your thought process. My wife's grandfather died in his garden. All the grandkids remember him spending the time outdoors and just loving it, to the point that when he died, he was in his garden. Well, that's kind of the way I want to go. I'm not suggesting that you follow that same path, but that's how much I enjoy it. I want my last minute on earth to be in a place that I enjoy and that I've enjoyed for years and years and years. And you have that opportunity right now to set yourself on that kind of path, which I think is just a wonderful path to be on. You have to learn. You have to struggle. You have to overcome a lot of adversity in the garden. And so at the end of this season, look to next season. Look back on this season and try to learn from what happened. Take the intervening winter months as that time to read some books, to watch a lot of videos, like my 200 videos that are in the library right now, to watch a lot of other great gardening channel videos, to learn what you need for next year. I haven't known all about gardening my whole life. In fact, in the 30 years that I've been gardening, it's really only been these last few years that I've become a recognized expert because I keep learning. I keep trying new things. I keep pushing the envelope. I keep trying to become a better gardener. And that's what I encourage so much that you consider. I often recommend that gardeners should have a garden journal. You may have heard me say this before in some of my earlier videos. It's a great way to keep track of what has happened so that you can learn from it. It's also a great way to give yourself some notes and ideas about what you're going to try in the future. But I think it's a great psychological exercise to get yourself more interested in gardening, because the mere act of writing something down on paper or typing something into your computer as it relates to gardening ingrains it in your mind as something that's important. So if you haven't started a journal, do it. If you have a journal, do more of it. I like to use these videos as part of my garden journal. It helps me keep track of what I'm growing. It gives me an idea of how the plants were doing at specific moments in time. And so one of the reasons that I bounce back and forth around my garden and always give you a different background It's so that you can have a little variety, and I'm not just sitting in front of the camera talking, but it's also so I can look back at this day in the garden and remember what was working and how it looked, so that during the winter months, and I often look back on my own videos just so I can improve in the future, but I can look at this bed right here with this cover and realize it was a good idea. The plants inside here are doing great. The harvests to come, the insects that I've already talked about, they're all documented in my videos for me, and I'm sharing them with you. And as I already talked about earlier with my grandkids, I think sharing the garden is one of the best things about gardening. Sharing your produce with a neighbor, sharing your stories with others who might be interested, sharing all aspects of gardening with others who hopefully will also become gardeners, or at least become better gardeners because of your influence. I ask that you don't compare your garden and your experiences with me or with anybody else. Even though I've had some pretty big battles with weather this year, I'm very happy with my garden. It looks wonderful. Part of it is luck. A lot of it is experience. So please don't look at what you've accomplished this year and look at my garden and think, oh, well, I'm a failure. I can't do as good as GardenerScott. Well, don't do that. Compare yourself with yourself. That's what I do. I'm happy with this garden because by comparison, this is one of the best gardens I've had. But I did everything right as I built this from scratch. And that's why I've been documenting all of the progress and all of these videos so that you can follow along and learn to do what I've done in this garden. And I know some of you have shared some of your successes, and I appreciate that so much. But if you've had worse battles with weather or with pests or with anything else, and your garden doesn't look that good this year, and that's why you think you're just going to wrap it up, throw in the towel, and not garden anymore, well, stop that way of thinking. Just compare yourself with yourself. Maybe this garden of yours doesn't look so good right now, but what was it at the beginning of the year? Especially if you were a new garden, it was nothing. So any plants that grew were a success. Anything you were able to harvest meant you were successful. That's the way I encourage you to look at gardening. And if you're young and you're new, 30 years from now, after you've developed the experience and the knowledge, now look at your garden at that point and think back to all you've learned, all you've accomplished, all those memories, everything about gardening that will give you the opportunity to truly enjoy it. This is my 200th video. I've been doing this 4 years, and I anticipate at least another 200 videos. I encourage you to subscribe to the GardenerScott channel so you can follow along as this garden grows and as your garden grows. To do that, please don't stop gardening this year. Plan to garden next year, and the year after, and the year after, and the year after. If this season was hard, if it was too hard, well, still do it again next year. Maybe do it on a smaller scale so you don't have as many challenges. Modify however you think to modify, but keep gardening. As you may have figured out in my live streams on Monday and a lot of my other videos, I think the philosophy within the garden is pretty close to the philosophy within life. How we approach things in life are so similar to how we approach things in the garden. And so I hope you wouldn't just give up on life because things got too hard. Well, that's why I'm suggesting don't give up on gardening because things are too hard. If you like gardening, if you enjoy gardening, then you want to push forward. Well, the same holds true with life. If you're enjoying life, you want more of it. There are so many correlations, so many things that you can gain from being surrounded by nature that just carry into your life, and they will make your life better. I encourage you to be better in the garden and to be better in life. And along the way, call yourself a gardener. And above all, enjoy gardening.